There are few stories you will read in a book, fiction or fact, that have as many twists and turns as the real life that you have lived. I knew a few details of your story, but reading through the book is a really powerful and painful and then redemptive experience at the same time. When you wrote the story again, was it hard for you to relive some of the decisions and some of the things that happened to you in your life that got you to where you ended up?
It was. You know, when I started writing the book, I had thought that I had dealt with everything that had happened to me. And when you're actually writing those things, it brings up, you know, that time, that moment. You have to step back in there, especially when I started working with a writer who's an amazing writer, Bethany Mager. Asked really great questions, asked me, you know, about some of the things that I was feeling and thinking, things that I really hadn't given much consideration to. And, you know, it opened those moments back up. And so it was really good to be able to just really process that and to just really step back in those moments, even though it was hard.
One part of your story that is particularly powerful and complicated is when you talk about your relationship with the idea that you were involved in sex trafficking. And it's really, really gripping in the book because you say you didn't consider yourself to be part of sex trafficking in any way. You know, there's a passage where you say, I thought of sex traffic victims as people who were in suitcases or stuffed into containers and chained, and yet I thought I had a boyfriend when in fact this was your pimp who was making you do what you were doing in the world. Is that part of the problem that we face in dealing with sex trafficking? Is that some of the people who are involved in it don't think of themselves as being victims in the situation?
Absolutely. You know, if you can't identify, you know, victims when it comes to some of the people who are supposed to be saying, you know, this is child abuse. I came across a study where I think it was 57% of mandatory reporters, where these are counselors, these are teachers, these are people who are in constant contact with youth. They're supposed to report every instance of child abuse, and 57% of them thought that some teenagers willingly prostituted themselves, thought that some teenagers traded sex for shelter, for food, because they did it, they consented. And that's just not the case. That is abuse. That is exploitation. And these individuals aren't reporting it. And if you have them saying, you're not a victim, you're actually willingly doing this, why wouldn't I believe it? And so for so long, you know, I thought I just consented. I was just promiscuous because that's what I was being told by society. And so it took for a campaign from a group in Tennessee called End Slavery that, you know, they stressed that there's no such thing as teenage prostitution. I didn't know anything about the federal statute that said anyone who's a minor, you know, it's actually a trafficking victim. There's no such thing as consent. And, you know, that was hard to kind of face. I used to argue with people when they said, you know, you were taken advantage of. No, I wasn't. I knew what I was doing. And that's just not the case.
It's really hard to be in that situation where you still want to maintain your agency, but at the same time, you have to admit that something was done to you.
Right.
You faced the ultimate punishment for what happened to you in your life, and that was after this man solicited you, took you back to his place, abused you, and essentially held you captive in his world. You killed him, and you were sentenced to life in prison. It was meant to be over 50 years. You served 15, which is essentially a life sentence because you were 16 years old at the time. In that time in prison, what did you think your world was going to be? You know, because you went in as a 16-year-old.
Well, I don't know, but I know that ever since I was in prison, I'd always dreamed of, you know, living a real life. I'd never let go of hoping that I would get out one day. So I really feel like I'm living my dream right now.
Wow.
And yeah, so I always kept that faith and kept that hope.
Is that why you studied in prison?
It is.
Because that was fascinating to me in the story. Is here's somebody who's going to spend the rest of their life in jail. There is no promise that you will get out. And yet here you are studying, furthering your education, trying to just make the best of the time that you have.
Yeah.
Why do that when you don't think you're going to get out?
Because I didn't believe them. Like, I didn't believe them when they told me I had life. And I would make a point of, when I would say things, you would hear a lot like of people say, you know, if I get out or if my conviction is overturned, I would always say when I get out. And I know my husband, I would talk to him all the time. Well, when I get out, I want to do this. And he would always be like, well, let's cross that bridge when we get there. But it's just something that came so natural when I get out, when I get out, when I get out. And it was like that for the entire 15 years.
When we look at the criminal justice system today in America, it is an unfortunate fact that there are many Cyntoia Browns who are experiencing its adverse effects. If there was one thing you wish would have been different when it came to how your case was handled, what would you wish that thing would be that would be applied to every case going forward?
My case specifically, number one, I do think that there were things that I needed to be held accountable for. And I think there are a lot of cases with juveniles who commit certain crimes. There has to be a level of accountability. There has to be consequences. However, a juvenile is not the same as an adult. Even the Supreme Court has already ruled that several times in a string of cases. So it just doesn't seem like it makes sense to me for the Supreme Court to say that juveniles are not as culpable as adults. However, they can get the same
sentencing.
They can get the same sentence.
Right.
And so I definitely think that that should have been different. I think it needs to change. It's still the case now. You still have juveniles who are tried as adults and they receive the same exact sentences as adults. And I think that's one of the things that needs to change. And to be honest with you, I think a lot of sentences are just excessive in general. I think that 51 years is ridiculous. Like, if you're going to give somebody life without parole, give them life without parole. Don't say, I'm going to give you a chance at parole after 51 years. That's not a chance. That's a death sentence. Like, who's going to make 51 years in prison? Nobody.
You have lived a story many wouldn't dream of living or have nightmares of living. You've come out on the other side. You still smile. You say you're living your dream. You have the opportunity to live now. What are the things Cyntoia does where you just go like, man, this is, apart from being free, this is just what life is about?
Honestly, like, when I'm just at home, sitting on the floor, watching a movie, I've cooked, I got my hair all over my head, just, just chilling. Like, this is it. This is what life is about. I don't have to worry about, watching the clock because it's going to be count time, or I need to hurry up and get my shower in before lockdown. It's just being able to be free.
That's all you can ask for. Thank you so much for being on the show. Wonderful having you here. Free Cyntoia, a stunning book, is available now. Cyntoia Brown-Long, everybody.